A billionaire's sperm is accidentally used to impregnate a struggling black woman. As secrets unravel, their lives collide in ways neither could imagine. Betrayals, revelations, and love redefine legacy in this gripping tale. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Rose Williams pulled her worn coat tighter as she hurried through the gleaming lobby of Manhattan Women's Health Center. The morning cleaning shift had been especially tough and her cramping was getting worse. At 23, she shouldn't be in this much pain every month, but here she was, finally getting it checked out at the same fancy clinic where she scrubbed floors at night. "I really don't know about this, Mama," she said into her phone. "This place isn't for people like us." "Now you stop that talk right now," her mother insisted. "That nice Dr. Preston said he'd see you at a discount. The Lord works in mysterious ways, baby girl." Rose smiled, remembering how she'd helped the doctor find his lost wedding ring during her night shift last week. He'd been so grateful he'd offered to check out her medical issues himself. The elevator doors opened to reveal a scene that made Rose shrink back. A tall man in an expensive suit was arguing loudly with a glamorous blonde woman whose diamond rings caught the light with every dramatic gesture. "Damn it, Vanessa, we're already running late," the man growled. "The appointment's at 9:30. "Well, excuse me for wanting to look presentable, Maxwell. This isn't exactly a trip to the grocery store. We're freezing your, you know." The woman, Vanessa, wrinkled her nose delicately. Rose recognized them from the society pages. Maxwell Richardson III and his wife were fertility clinic regulars. She'd cleaned their paperwork off Dr. Preston's desk enough times to know they'd been trying for a baby for years. The couple swept past her into the elevator she'd just left, Vanessa's designer perfume lingering in the air. Rose waited for the next one, her hands shaking slightly as she pressed the button for the 4th floor. Dr. Preston's office was chaos when she arrived. Files were scattered across the receptionist's desk, phones were ringing off the hook, and the doctor himself looked frazzled as he rushed between rooms. "Rose, I'm so sorry, we're running behind," he called out. "Give me 20 minutes to get Mr. Richardson's sample stored, then we'll do your exam." She nodded, sinking into one of the plush waiting room chairs. Through the wall, she could hear the Richardsons still bickering. "I can't believe you're putting me through this," Vanessa was saying. "If you hadn't insisted on that experimental treatment—" "The cancer's gone, isn't it?" Maxwell snapped back. "Better to store some swimmers now before the next round of chemo, unless you'd rather give up on having the baby you won't stop talking about." Rose tried not to listen, focusing instead on the fashion magazine in her lap. But their voices carried. "Fine, but I don't see why we have to use this clinic. Everyone knows Dr. Preston takes charity cases. Because he's the best in Manhattan and I'm not taking chances. Now can you please just—" Their voices faded as a door closed. Rose felt her face burning. She didn't want to be here, in this fancy place where people like Vanessa Richardson clearly thought she didn't belong. But the pain in her belly reminded her why she had to stay. 20 minutes turned into 45 as more emergencies kept popping up. Dr. Preston looked increasingly stressed each time he passed through. Finally, he ushered Rose into an exam room. "I'm so sorry for the wait," he said, rubbing his temples. "It's been one of those mornings. Now, you said you've been having severe cramping." Rose nodded, describing her symptoms. The doctor frowned, making notes. "I'd like to do an ultrasound to check for endometriosis," he said. "Then we might try a simple procedure to help with the pain. Nothing to worry about, just a quick injection that should offer some relief." It all happened so fast after that. The ultrasound, the nurse prepping her for the procedure, Dr. Preston rushing in and out as other patients demanded his attention. "This might be a bit uncomfortable," he warned as he prepared the injection. His phone buzzed again and he glanced at it distractedly. "But you should feel better soon." Rose closed her eyes and tried to relax. She felt the pinch of the needle, then a strange cramping sensation. "All done," Dr. Preston said, already stripping off his gloves. "Rest here for a few minutes, then you can head home. Call if you have any concerns." He was gone before Rose could even thank him. She lay there for a while, wondering if she was imagining the weird, fluttery feeling in her belly. Later that night, as she mopped the clinic's floors, Rose passed by Dr. Preston's office. He was still there, head in his hands as he stared at patient files. "Long day?" she asked softly. He looked up, startled. "Rose, how are you feeling?" "Okay, I think. Just a little strange." He nodded absently, already turning back to his paperwork. "That's normal. Get some rest when you can. As Rose wheeled her mop bucket down the hall, she heard him mutter something that sounded like, "Where did I put that damn sample?" If only they'd known then how that simple question would change all their lives forever. 6 weeks later, Rose sat in the same exam room, staring at Dr. Preston in shock as he delivered news that would turn her world upside down. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. "But how? I haven't been with anyone in over a year." The doctor's face had gone ashen. He kept flipping through her chart, then checking his computer, then flipping through the chart again. "This can't be right," he muttered. "Unless... oh no." "Dr. Preston, what's wrong?" He sank into his chair, looking like he might be sick. "Rose, I need you to listen carefully. There's been a mistake, a terrible mistake." And with those words, everything changed. Not just for Rose, but for the Richardsons, for Dr. Preston, and for a baby who would come into the world carrying the hopes, fears, and prejudices of them all. The story was about to begin, and nothing would ever be the same. Pregnant with whose baby? Rose's mother dropped her coffee mug, barely noticing as it shattered on their small kitchen floor. Rose couldn't stop crying. Maxwell Richardson's. The doctor made a mistake with the samples. He was supposed to give me medicine for my pain, but somehow he used the wrong... Lord have mercy. Her mother sank into a chair. That rich white man's baby? The one married to that skinny blonde who's always in the magazines? Before Rose could respond, someone knocked on their apartment door. Through the peephole, she saw men in expensive suits. "Miss Williams?" one called out. "We're from the Manhattan Women's Health Center legal team. We need to speak with you immediately." The next few hours were a blur, men in suits explaining things like settlement offers and confidentiality agreements, numbers with more zeros than Rose had ever seen, and one very clear message: they wanted this to go away. "Just tell us what you want," one lawyer said smoothly. "The clinic is prepared to be very generous." Rose's hand went to her stomach. I want to keep my baby." The lawyers exchanged looks. "Miss Williams, you have to understand the position this puts everyone in. The Richardsons are a prominent family. This situation could ruin many lives and careers, including yours," another added. "Think about your job, your reputation." But Rose thought about the tiny life growing inside her, a miracle, even if it came about through a mistake. "No," she said firmly. "I won't end this pregnancy. This baby deserves a chance." The lawyers left, leaving behind their cards and veiled threats. Rose's mother hugged her tight. "Baby girl, are you sure about this? It's going to be hard." "I know, Mama, but it's my choice. Our choice," she added, touching her belly again. She had no idea that across town, in the Richardsons' penthouse, an even bigger storm was brewing. "What do you mean a cleaning lady is carrying my baby?" Vanessa's scream could probably be heard in New Jersey. She hurled a crystal vase at the wall. Maxwell sat very still, staring at Dr. Preston, who had come to break the news in person. "And there's no chance this is a mistake? The timing, the records." "I checked everything 3 times, Dr. Preston said miserably. "I take full responsibility. The clinic is prepared to handle this discreetly." "Discreetly?" Vanessa laughed hysterically. "My husband's sperm was used to impregnate some... Her name is Rose Williams," Maxwell said quietly, "and she's carrying my child." Vanessa spun to face him. Don't you dare even think about acknowledging this and this accident." "What would you have me do?" Maxwell stood up. "Force her to terminate, pay her off?" "Yes!" Vanessa shrieked. "Whatever it takes. Do you have any idea what this will do to us, to your family's reputation, to me?" Maxwell looked at his wife of 5 years, the woman he'd married after a whirlwind romance, who'd been pushing for a baby ever since, who now stood there caring more about reputation than the life they'd been trying so hard to create. "I need some air," he muttered, grabbing his coat. "Where are you going?" Vanessa demanded. "To think. Don't wait up." He ended up at his father's club, a place he usually avoided. Maxwell Richardson II was holding court as usual, drinking expensive scotch with other rich old men. "Junior, join us." Maxwell winced at the nickname but sat down. Maybe his father would surprise him, maybe. "I just heard the most ridiculous rumor," his father said, swirling his drink. "Something about a pregnant cleaning girl at that clinic." "Of yours?" So much for breaking it to him gently. "It's not a rumor, Dad." The scotch glass froze halfway to his father's lips. "Tell me you're joking. The doctor made a mistake with the samples. She's carrying my child." "No," his father said, flatly. "She's carrying a mistake that will be handled with money like all mistakes. She's refusing to terminate. Then she'll be convinced everyone has a price. Maxwell thought of Rose Williams, of how scared she must be, of the baby, his baby, growing inside her. Maybe some things shouldn't have a price. His father's face darkened. "Listen to me very carefully, son. You will fix this or you will lose everything. Your position in the company, your inheritance, your place in this family. Do I make myself clear?" Maxwell stood up. "Crystal clear, Dad, crystal clear." He walked out of the club into the cold Manhattan night. His phone buzzed. Vanessa calling. Again. He ignored it. Without really meaning to, he found himself driving to the address he'd gotten from Dr. Preston, a modest apartment building in Queens. As he sat in his car, he saw Rose Williams walking home from the bus stop, still in her cleaning uniform. She looked tired, but somehow peaceful. His child was growing inside her, a child that would be his heir, even if it didn't match the perfect picture everyone had planned. Maxwell made a decision then that would change everything. He got out of his car. "Miss Williams?" he called softly. "Could we talk?" Rose turned, her eyes widening with recognition. And in that moment, as two very different worlds collided on a quiet street in Queens, the real story began. Rose stared at Maxwell Richardson, standing there in his expensive coat, looking so out of place on her street. "Mr. Richardson, Please call me Maxwell." He glanced around awkwardly. "Could we maybe get coffee somewhere to talk?" They ended up in Marie's Diner, a small place around the corner. The late-night regulars barely glanced up from their meals as the unlikely pair slid into a booth. "I'm not taking any money," Rose said immediately. "I've already told the lawyers. That's not why I'm here." Maxwell wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. I needed to meet you properly, to tell you I'm sorry about all this." "You're sorry?" Rose almost laughed. "Your wife's... People have been calling my job, spreading rumors. Someone followed my mama home from church yesterday." Maxwell's face darkened. "Vanessa, I'll put a stop to that." "Can you? Really?" Rose leaned forward. "Because I'm scared, Mr. Richardson. Not just for me, but for this baby. Your baby." Something in her words seemed to hit him hard. He stared at his coffee for a long moment. "I want to help," he finally said. "Whatever you need. The best doctors. A safer place to live, anything. I don't need your charity." "It's not charity, it's my responsibility. My child deserves a better mother than a cleaning lady." Rose's eyes flashed. "That's not what I meant." Maxwell ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Look, I'm trying here. This situation isn't ideal for any of us, but that baby is innocent. And if you're determined to have it, I am. Then let me be involved, please." Before Rose could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from her supervisor at the clinic. "Need to discuss your position. Come in early tomorrow." Rose's heart sank. She knew what that meant. Maxwell must have seen her face fall. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, I should go." She started to slide out of the booth. "Rose, wait." He pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. "My private number. Call me if you need anything." "I mean it." She took the card, not knowing it would save her life just a few days later. At the clinic the next morning, Rose's supervisor, Jane, wouldn't meet her eyes. "I'm sorry, but we have to let you go. There have been complaints." "Complaints about my work?" "About your character." Jane pushed some papers across the desk. "If you sign these non-disclosure agreements, you'll get 2 months severance." Rose felt sick. Without this job, without insurance, who complained? Jane just looked away. Later that day, Vanessa Richardson sat in her luxury spa getting a massage. Her phone pinged with a message. "It's done. The girl lost her job." Vanessa smiled. "That's just the beginning," she whispered. She had no idea how right she was, because at that exact moment, Dr. James Preston was staring at some very disturbing lab results. The timing of Rose's procedure, the missing sample, it was all starting to make a horrible kind of sense. And there was something else, something in Maxwell's genetic screening that he'd overlooked in all the chaos. Information that could change everything. Across town, Maxwell sat in his office, looking at old photos of his father. The same father who'd just cut off his access to the family accounts. His phone kept buzzing with texts from Vanessa. "Where are you?" "The country club is asking questions. Your father called again." He ignored them all, focused instead on the photo he'd pulled up on his computer. A news article about Rose Williams winning a scholarship in high school. The headline read, "Local student dreams of medical career, defers college to care for sick mother." There was more to this woman than anyone knew. And despite everything, his wife's rage, his father's threats, the whispers at his club, Maxwell found himself wanting to know more. His private phone, the one whose number he'd given Rose, lit up with an unknown caller. "Mr. Richardson," Rose's voice was shaking. "I lost my job and there's someone watching my apartment." Maxwell was already grabbing his coat. "I'm on my way. Pack a bag." "What? Where am I supposed to go?" "Somewhere safe. Do you trust me?" There was a long pause. "I don't have much choice, do I?" As Maxwell hurried to his car, Vanessa was making another call. "I don't care what it costs," she hissed into the phone. "I want everything there is to know about Rose Williams, every secret, every weakness, everything." The private investigator on the other end made some notes. "It'll take time, Mrs. Richardson." "No, it won't, because I already know where to look." Vanessa smiled as she pulled out an old newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Tragic Fire Claims Lives of Rose Williams. Father and Sister." "Sometimes," Vanessa mused, "old tragedies have a way of coming back to haunt us." She had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be, because the truth about that fire was just one of many secrets about to explode into the open, and not all of them belonged to Rose. The safe house turned out to be a luxury apartment in a discreet building on the Upper East Side. Rose stood in the massive living room, still clutching her small overnight bag. "It belongs to my grandmother," Maxwell explained. "No one knows about it except me. You'll be safe here." "For how long?" Rose asked. "I can't hide forever, and without my job, let me handle that." Maxwell pulled out his phone. "I have a friend who owns a private medical practice. They're always looking for good administrative staff." Rose shook her head. "I don't need you to—" "Yes, you do," Maxwell cut her off, "because right now you're carrying my child, and someone is trying to scare you. Both of those things are my responsibility." Before Rose could argue, her phone rang. Her mother. "Baby girl, you need to come home right now," her mother said, voice shaking. "There's a woman here. She says she knows about the fire." Rose felt the blood drain from her face. "Mama, don't tell her anything. I'm on my way." "What's wrong?" Maxwell asked as she grabbed her bag. "I have to go. My mother. There's someone. I'm coming with you." "No, this isn't your problem." Maxwell grabbed his keys. "It is. Now let's go." They found Vanessa sitting in Rose's mother's tiny living room, looking completely out of place in her designer outfit. She smiled when she saw them. "Well, isn't this cozy? Maxwell, darling, I had no idea you were playing chauffeur now." "Get out," Maxwell growled. "Not until Rose explains about the fire." Vanessa pulled out some papers. The one that killed her father and sister. The one that the insurance company had some very interesting questions about. Rose's mother made a small sound of pain. "You leave my family alone," Rose said, her voice low and dangerous. "Oh, but they are fascinating." Vanessa stood up. "A mysterious fire, a big insurance payout. And look who signed off on the investigation. Dr. James Preston's father, who was the medical examiner at the time. Quite a coincidence, don't you think?" Maxwell looked between them. "What is she talking about?" "Nothing," Rose said quickly. "It was an accident, everyone said so." "Did they? Or did someone pay them to say that?" Vanessa smiled again. "Money can make a lot of problems go away, isn't that right, Mrs. Williams?" Rose's mother stood up suddenly. "Get out of my house. That fire took my husband and my baby girl. How dare you come here and—" "Mama, please." Rose touched her arm. "Don't." But Vanessa wasn't done. "Your father was a mechanic, wasn't he, Rose? Working on an experimental engine design, worth quite a bit of money to the right people. And then, suddenly, a fire. How convenient." "Enough!" Maxwell's voice cracked, like a whip. "Vanessa, if you don't leave right now—" "You'll what, tell Daddy?" Vanessa laughed. "Oh wait, you can't. He's cut you off, hasn't he? Just like he cut off funding for that little engine project 15 years ago." Maxwell froze. "What did you say?" "Oops, did I say too much?" Vanessa headed for the door. "Maybe you should ask your father about Richardson Motors' experimental engine division and why it shut down right after a tragic fire in Queens." After she left, the silence was deafening. "Maxwell?" Rose touched his arm. "What's going on?" He looked sick. "I need to make some calls." But before he could leave, Dr. Preston burst in, out of breath. "Thank God you're both here. We have a bigger problem." "What now?" Rose asked wearily. "The genetic screening results." Dr. Preston pulled out some papers. "Maxwell, there's something you need to know about your DNA markers." "Is something wrong?" "With the baby?" Rose's hand flew to her stomach. "No, the baby is fine, but Maxwell, these results, they don't match your father's genetic profile." Maxwell stared at him. "What are you saying?" I'm saying Maxwell Richardson II isn't your biological father, and I think he's known all along. Rose sank into a chair as Maxwell's world fell apart in front of her. All the pieces were starting to fit together. His father's rage about the baby, Vanessa's hints about the fire, Dr. Preston's connection to it all. There's more, Dr. Preston said quietly. The man I believe is your real father. He died in a fire 15 years ago in Queens. Rose's mother let out a small gasp. Robert? My Robert? And suddenly everything changed, because Rose wasn't just carrying Maxwell's baby. She was carrying the grandchild of the man who might have been murdered for loving Maxwell's mother. The past wasn't just haunting them anymore. It was about to blow their whole world apart. Your father and my father, Rose whispered. How is that possible? Maxwell paced the small living room. My mother, she used to visit Queens sometimes. She said she was doing charity work. I was young, I never questioned it. Rose's mother wiped her eyes. Robert talked about her. A beautiful woman who understood his ideas. Catherine, he called her. Catherine. Maxwell stopped pacing. My mother's name. She died when I was 12. They said it was an accident. Dr. Preston cleared his throat. Maybe it wasn't. Look at this. He spread out old newspaper clippings on the coffee table. Stories about Robert Williams's experimental engine design, about Catherine Richardson's charity work in Queens, about 2 separate accidents years apart. Someone went to a lot of trouble to keep these connections hidden, Dr. Preston said. The question is, why? Maxwell's phone rang. His father. Where? Are you Maxwell Richardson II demanded. The board meeting is in an hour. I'm not coming. The hell you're not? This is about your future, your inheritance, like the inheritance you stole from my real father. Maxwell's voice shook. Robert Williams ring a bell. Silence. Then, who told you? Does it matter? What happened, Dad? Did you kill him to keep your perfect family image clean? Don't be dramatic. I protected you, protected all of us. That man was trying to blackmail your mother with some ridiculous patent claim. He was my father. He was nothing, a nobody who got ideas above his station, just like that cleaning girl you're so concerned about. Rose could hear every word. Her face hardened. The board meeting is in an hour, Maxwell Richardson said, repeated. Be there or you'll regret it. Are you threatening me? I'm promising. You. 1 hour. The line went dead. He's scared, Rose said quietly. Men like that don't make threats unless they're scared. Maxwell looked at her. We need proof about the fire, about my mother, about all of it. I might know where to look, Dr. Preston said. My father kept records of everything. They're in storage at the old medical examiner's office. Then let's go get them. Wait. Rose stood up. First we need to deal with Vanessa. She knows too much. As if on cue, the TV in the corner started blaring breaking news. Scandal at Manhattan Women's Health Center. Sources claim prestigious clinic involved in fertility fraud. They watched in horror as Vanessa appeared on screen, tears in her eyes. My husband's genetic material was stolen, she sobbed, used without consent. And now this woman, this cleaning lady, is trying to blackmail our family. That lying... Rose's mother grabbed the remote, but Maxwell stopped her. Wait, look behind Vanessa. In the background of the news footage, partially hidden, stood Maxwell Richardson II, and he was talking to someone they all recognized. That's my old supervisor from the engine project. Rose's mother gasped. The one who testified the fire was an accident. Maxwell grabbed his keys. Dr. Preston, get those records. Rose, come with me. Where? To the board meeting. It's time everyone knew the truth. But Vanessa was 1 step ahead of them. As they raced across town, she was already at Richardson headquarters, meeting with the board of directors. I have proof, she told them, sliding folders across the table. Proof that Maxwell Richardson III is not only protecting a blackmailer, but that he himself is illegitimate. The company bylaws are clear. Only legitimate Richardson heirs can hold voting shares. The board members murmured in shock. And there's more, Vanessa continued, about Catherine Richardson's death, about Robert Williams, about how far some people will go to protect their secrets. She glanced at her phone. A message from a blocked number. Evidence destroyed, me office cleaned out. Vanessa smiled. Everything was going according to plan, but she'd forgotten one thing. Rose Williams wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for her father's memory, for her unborn child, for the truth. And Rose had a secret of her own. The night before the fire, her father had hidden something. If anything happens to me, he'd said. Look behind your mother's wedding picture. For 15 years, that hidden thing had waited. Papers, designs, letters, and photographs. Photographs of Catherine Richardson, of private meetings, of documents being signed, proof of everything. As Maxwell and Rose pulled up to Richardson headquarters, she squeezed the old envelope in her pocket. "Are you sure about this?" Maxwell asked. Rose thought about her father, about Maxwell's mother, about the baby growing inside her, a baby that connected all these broken pieces. "Some secrets," she said, "need to see the light." They walked into the building together, not knowing that up in the boardroom, Vanessa was about to play her final card. A card that would turn their revelation into a matter of life and death. The Richardson Industries boardroom fell silent as Maxwell and Rose walked in. 12 pairs of eyes stared at them, the board members in their expensive suits, Vanessa standing at the head of the table, and Maxwell Richardson II looking like he'd seen a ghost. "This meeting is private," Vanessa snapped. "Not anymore." Maxwell looked at the board members. "You've all heard my wife's version of events. Now it's time for the truth." "The truth," his father stood up. "The truth is you're throwing away everything our family built for some what?" Rose stepped forward. "Some cleaning lady? Or your dead son's daughter?" More shocked silence. "What is she talking about?" one of the board members asked. "Show them," Maxwell told Rose. She pulled out the envelope and began laying out its contents on the table. Old photographs, letters, patent applications. "My father didn't die in an accident," Rose said clearly. "He was murdered because he fell in love with Catherine Richardson, because they had a child together, Maxwell, and because he invented something that would have changed everything." "Lies." Maxwell Richardson II slammed his fist on the table. "Then explain these." Rose held up a stack of letters. "Love letters between my father and Catherine, DNA test results proving Maxwell is their son, and this, the original patent for the engine design signed by both of them." Vanessa laughed, but it sounded forced. "You expect anyone to believe this fairy tale?" "I believe it." Everyone turned. Dr. Preston stood in the doorway holding a box of old files. "My father was the medical examiner," he said, walking to the table. "He knew the fire wasn't an accident. He knew about Catherine's death too, and he left proof." "This is ridiculous," Maxwell Richardson II sputtered. You demand nothing." Maxwell's voice rang out. "You killed my real father. You probably killed my mother. All for what? Money, power. I protected this company," the older man roared. "That mechanic was going to ruin everything with his revolutionary engine design. Catherine was going to leave me for him, take you, expose everything. I couldn't let that happen." The boardroom erupted in chaos, but above the noise, Vanessa's calm voice cut through. "None of this matters anymore." She pulled out her phone, pressed a button. On the big screen behind her, security camera footage appeared. It showed Dr. Preston in his clinic years ago, talking to someone. "Oh my God," Rose whispered. "That's my father, the night before he died." In the video, Robert Williams handed Dr. Preston an envelope. "Keep this safe," they could hear him say. "If anything happens to me." "Where did you get this?" Dr. Preston went pale. Vanessa smiled. "The clinic keeps everything, and this proves you knew about the murder plan. You could have stopped it. You're as guilty as anyone." "No." Dr. Preston stepped back. "I tried to warn him, but it was too late. Save it for the police." Vanessa pressed another button on her phone. "Who should be here any minute?" Anonymous tip about a 15-year-old murder conspiracy. But Rose was smiling now too. "What's so funny?" Vanessa demanded. "Check your phone again. Try to make any calls." Vanessa's phone showed no signal. Neither did anyone else's. "A little trick I learned from my father." Rose nodded to the ceiling. "Sound waves that disrupt cell signals. The patent for that one is hidden too, along with copies of everything else safely stored where you'll never find them." "You're bluffing." "Am I? My father taught me everything he knew. While I was cleaning offices at night, I was also learning, studying, planning, waiting for a chance to prove what really happened." Maxwell stared at her with new respect, and something else. "It's over," he told his father and Vanessa. "The truth is out. The board knows everything." And in about 30 seconds, when Rose turns off her device, a whole lot of evidence is going to be automatically uploaded to every news outlet in the country. "You can't," Maxwell Richardson II began. "Watch me." Rose pulled out another device. "This baby's father gave me the strength to stand up to you. And my father gave me the tools to bring you down." She pressed a button. Cell phones started buzzing all around the room as signals returned. "Breaking news!" someone called out, looking at their phone. "Richardson Industries involved in multiple murder cover-up." Vanessa lunged for the door, but security was already there. "Mrs. Richardson," an officer said, "we have some questions about your involvement in a conspiracy." As Vanessa and Maxwell Richardson II were led away in handcuffs, the board members huddled together, talking urgently about damage control. "Miss Williams," one of them approached. "Her, given your father's contributions to this company, and the fact that your child will be a Richardson heir, perhaps we should discuss your future role here." Rose looked at Maxwell, who was watching her with that same intense expression. "First," she said, "I think we need to discuss reinstating my father's patents and setting up a foundation in his and Catherine's name." Of course, but Rose wasn't done. "And one more thing about Dr. Preston." The doctor looked up fearfully. "The video shows he tried to warn my father. He kept evidence that helped expose the truth. I think that should count for something." Maxwell took her hand. "We'll make sure of it." As the chaos of arrests and revelations swirled around them, Rose suddenly felt dizzy. "Rose?" Maxwell steadied her. "What's wrong?" She pressed a hand to her stomach. "The baby, I think something's wrong." And as Maxwell called for help, as Dr. Preston rushed to her side, Rose's world started to go black. The truth was finally out. But their story wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. The emergency room at Manhattan General was chaos, but Maxwell Richardson barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on the doors they'd wheeled Rose through 10 minutes ago. "Mr. Richardson?" Dr. Preston touched his arm. "Maybe you should sit down. What's wrong with her? The baby? The stress of everything? It could be just exhaustion." "But with her blood pressure readings," Rose's mother burst in, still wearing her church clothes. "Where is she, my baby?" Before anyone could answer, a doctor emerged. "Family of Rose Williams?" "Here," Maxwell and Mrs. Williams said together. The doctor looked between them. "She's stabilized, but she's showing signs of preeclampsia. We need to monitor her carefully." "The baby?" Mrs. Williams whispered. "Strong heartbeat, but we're concerned. She's only at 6 months. We need to keep her here, complete bed rest." Maxwell ran his hands through his hair. "Can we see her?" In the hospital room, Rose looked small against the white sheets. Monitors beeped steadily around her. "I'm sorry," she said when she saw them. "I ruined the big moment." "Hush now." Her mother took one hand while Maxwell took the other. "The company, the evidence, is all being handled," Maxwell assured her. "The board is in emergency sessions. Vanessa and my father are in custody. Everything else can wait." Rose closed her eyes. "I was so focused on justice, on the truth. I didn't think about taking care of yourself," Dr. Preston finished from the doorway. "Something you and your father had in common." A nurse came in with more monitors. "Sorry, but we need to run some tests." "I'll stay," Maxwell said immediately. Rose looked at him. "Don't you have an empire to save? Some things are more important." Over the next few days, Rose's hospital room became the unofficial headquarters of Richardson Industries' transformation. Board members came and went, signing papers, discussing the future. Through it all, Maxwell rarely left her side. "You don't have to stay," Rose told him one night. "I know there's so much to handle." "I lost one family to lies and greed," Maxwell said quietly. "I won't lose another to neglect." Rose felt her heart skip, and not just because of the monitors. Another family. Maxwell took her hand. "Rose, these past weeks is finding out about our fathers working together, seeing your strength. A commotion in the hallway interrupted them. Vanessa was being led in handcuffs by police, Dr. Preston hurrying behind them. "She tried to delete clinic records," he explained, "but we caught her. She's confessed to everything, the conspiracy, the cover-up, even hiring people to threaten Rose." Vanessa saw them through the door. "You'll regret this, both of you." "Get her out of here," Maxwell growled, but Rose was clutching her stomach, face twisted in pain. "Rose?" Maxwell hit the call button as monitors started beeping frantically. "The baby," she gasped. "Something's wrong." Everything happened fast after that. Doctors rushing in, words like emergency C-section and fetal distress. "It's too early," Rose cried as they prepared to move her. "We don't have a choice," the doctor said. "The baby's heart rate is dropping." Maxwell tried to follow them into surgery, but they stopped him. "Please," he begged. "They're my family." Mrs. Williams took his hand. "Then maybe it's time to make that official." Maxwell looked at her in surprise. "See how you look at her," she said. "The same way her father used to look at your mother. Real love, not the kind you can buy or fake for cameras." "I do love her," Maxwell admitted. "I think I have since that first night at the diner." "Then stop waiting for the right moment. In our family, we learned the hard way that moments are precious." A nurse rushed out. "Mr. Richardson? She's asking for you." They let him suit up in surgical gear. Rose was on the operating table, scared but conscious. "Maxwell?" She reached for his hand. "If anything happens, nothing's going to happen. Listen to me. If you have to choose, I choose both of you," he said firmly. "We're going to be a family, a real one." Tears slid down Rose's face. "You mean that? Marry me. Not because of the baby, or the company, or any of it. Marry me because I love you." Before Rose could answer, the doctor called out, "We need to start now." Maxwell gripped her hand tighter. "I'll be right here. Promise?" "Promise." As the surgery began, as they fought to save mother and child, a new chapter was already writing itself. One where love conquered greed, truth defeated lies, and a baby born of science's mistake would heal the wounds of the past. But first, they had to survive the next few minutes, and somewhere between one heartbeat and the next, a tiny cry filled the operating room. 3 pounds, 6 ounces, the nurse announced. Small, but fighting. Through her exhausted haze, Rose watched them whisk her baby to the NICU. Maxwell was torn, looking between her and the door where they'd taken his son. "Go," she whispered. "Go with him. Don't let him be alone." Maxwell kissed her forehead. "I'll be right back. I promise." In the NICU, the tiny baby looked even smaller, surrounded by machines and tubes. Maxwell pressed his hand against the incubator's glass. "Hey there, little guy," he said softly. "You've got your grandmother Catherine's chin and your grandfather Robert's fighting spirit." A nurse smiled as she checked the monitors. "Have you picked a name?" Maxwell thought about it. Robert Williams Richardson. Back in Rose's room, her mother was helping her sit up when Maxwell's phone rang. The board chairman. "Turn on the TV," he said urgently. Breaking news filled the screen. "Maxwell Richardson, too, found dead in holding cell," Rose gasped. Maxwell sank into a chair. "Apparent suicide," the chairman continued. "But there's more. He left a confession. About everything. Robert Williams, Catherine, the patents, and about Vanessa." "What about her?" "She's his daughter, your half-sister. That's why he pushed you to marry her, to keep the company in what he thought was true Richardson blood." Maxwell felt sick. All those years, all those lies. "There's one more thing," the chairman added. Before he died, he transferred everything into your name, the company, the accounts, everything. With a note, "Try to do better than I did." After he hung up, Rose reached for Maxwell's hand. "Are you okay?" "I don't know. He was a monster, but he was still the only father you knew," Rose finished. "It's okay to grieve him." A nurse came in with forms. "For the birth certificate, father's name?" Maxwell squared his shoulders. "Robert Williams Richardson II, continuing his real grandfather's legacy." Suddenly, Dr. Preston burst in. "You need to see this." He held up his tablet. On it was security footage from the holding cell. Maxwell's father wasn't alone when he died. Someone was with him, someone who handed him something right before... "Vanessa," Rose breathed. "She's still out there." "Not for long," Maxwell promised. But his phone was already ringing again. "Mr. Richardson, there's been a break-in at the NICU." Maxwell ran, his heart pounding. But when he reached the nursery, baby Robert was safe, sleeping peacefully. The nurse, however, looked shaken. "A woman," she said. "She tried to get in, but security stopped her. She dropped this." It was a letter addressed to Maxwell. "Dear brother, did you really think it would end like this? That you'd get the happy family I was supposed to have? Daddy might be gone, but his plan will still work. One way or another, I'll get what's mine. Watch your back. By V." "We need protection," Maxwell told the security chief. 24/7 guards on my son and Rose." "Already done, sir. But there's something else you should know. We found these. In her apartment. More photographs, more documents. A whole new conspiracy, stretching back even further than they'd imagined." "She was never just your wife," Dr. Preston said, studying the papers. "She was placed in your life years ago by people who wanted to control the Richardson fortune. People who might still be out there." Rose struggled to sit up. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this isn't over. The people behind Vanessa, behind everything, they're still moving pieces on the board, as if to prove his point. Phones all." Over the hospital started buzzing with a new alert. Breaking. Questions arise about Richardson baby's paternity. Sources claim fertility clinic records tampered with. Maxwell crumpled the paper in his fist. They're trying to claim he's not mine. They're desperate, Dr. Preston said. I have the original records we can prove. But Rose was smiling. Let them try. What do you mean? Check the baby's DNA against Robert Williams' samples from the old case files. Check it against Catherine's medical records. The truth is in the blood, just like it always was. Maxwell looked at her with pride. You never stop amazing me. Good, because I have one more surprise. She handed him a paper she'd been holding. I found my answer to your question. It was a marriage license application, already signed. You sure? He asked softly. Even with everything going on? Rose touched his face. Life's too short to wait for perfect moments. My father and your mother taught us that. In the NICU, baby Robert stirred in his incubator. Outside, reporters gathered as news of Maxwell Richardson II's death spread. And somewhere in the city, Vanessa plotted her next move. But in that hospital room, as Maxwell kissed his future wife, none of that mattered. They had fought for their truth. They would fight for their future. And this time they would fight together. 3 weeks after baby Robert came home from the hospital, Rose stood in front of a mirror at Manhattan's most exclusive bridal salon. Her mother dabbed at her eyes as Rose smoothed the simple white dress. Your father would be so proud, she whispered. Rose touched the locket around her neck, her father's last gift, now containing a tiny photo of baby Robert. I wish he could be here. Miss Williams? A salon assistant poked her head in. There's a delivery for you. The large box held a stunning vintage veil. The note read, This was Catherine's. She would have wanted you to have it. Dr. Preston. But as Rose lifted the veil, something fell from its folds. A small USB drive. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maxwell. Don't trust anything that comes in today. Vanessa was spotted near the salon. Too late. As Rose picked up the drive, smoke started pouring from the box. Within seconds, the room was filled with thick, choking gas. Mom! Rose grabbed her mother's hand and ran for the door, but it wouldn't open. Outside, Vanessa watched through binoculars from a nearby rooftop. Goodbye, dear sister-in-law, she murmured. But she'd underestimated Rose again. The salon's sprinkler system suddenly activated, clearing the gas. And when the emergency doors burst open, it wasn't just Rose and her mother who emerged. It was a full SWAT team. Did you really think I'd try on wedding dresses without security? Rose asked as the police surrounded Vanessa. After everything? Maxwell ran up, having watched the operation from a command center nearby. Are you okay? The baby is safe with Dr. Preston at the penthouse, surrounded by guards. Rose smiled. I learn from my mistakes. But Vanessa was laughing as they handcuffed her. Oh, honey, you still don't get it, do you? This was just a distraction. Rose's phone rang. Dr. Preston panicked. Someone hacked the hospital systems. They're releasing all the records, including proof that Robert isn't Maxwell's biological son. That's impossible, Maxwell said. The DNA tests were altered, Vanessa smirked, by the same person who's been pulling strings for years. The same person who really killed your mother, Maxwell. The same person who's been waiting decades to destroy the Richardson empire. Who? Why don't you ask your grandmother, the one whose empty penthouse you're using as a safe house? Maxwell went pale. Beatrice? But she's been in Europe for years. Has she? Or has she been right here, watching, waiting? Did you never wonder why? She gave you that apartment, the one with direct access to the private elevator to the penthouse, Rose gasped, where Dr. Preston and the baby are right now. They raced to the building, but the streets were gridlocked. Maxwell tried calling. Dr. Preston. No answer. She's my grandmother, Maxwell said as they ran through back alleys. She wouldn't hurt her own great-grandson. Like your father wouldn't hurt his son? Rose shot back. Money poisoned this family long before we came along. They reached the building just as Beatrice Richardson emerged from the private elevator. In her arms was baby Robert, sleeping peacefully. Dr. Preston followed, looking ashamed. I'm sorry. She had proof that could destroy my career, my life. It's nothing personal, Beatrice said calmly. But this child represents the end of everything I built. The Richardson name belongs to True Blood, not some mechanic's spawn. He is True Blood, Rose said. More than you know. She pulled out the USB drive from the veil. This wasn't just a trap. It was Catherine's insurance policy. The real DNA tests, the real records, and the truth about who you really are. Beatrice's face tightened. You're bluffing. Am I? Catherine wasn't just Robert's lover. She was your daughter, which means I'm not the gold digger marrying into money. You're the imposter who stole the Richardson name 50 years ago. Maxwell stared at his grandmother. What is she talking about? Show him, Rose told Dr. Preston. Show him what you found in your father's old records. Dr. Preston pulled out his tablet. Beatrice Richardson was born Beatrice Waters, a nurse at the hospital where the real Beatrice Richardson died in 1971. She used her position to take the dead woman's identity, marry into the family, and kill anyone who discovered the truth, including Catherine when she found out, Rose added. Your own daughter. Beatrice's elegant mask cracked. She was going to ruin everything, just like this bastard child will. She moved toward the window. One step closer and we'll both go over. But she'd forgotten about the one person she'd already betrayed. Dr. Preston, moving with surprising speed for his age, grabbed the baby from her arms. Beatrice stumbled, and 50 years of lies ended with one small step backward. As police sirens wailed below, Rose clutched her son, crying. Maxwell held them both. He's perfect, Dr. Preston said softly. A true Richardson Williams heir. Blood will tell after all. Later, as they watched Vanessa and Dr. Preston give their statements to police, Rose leaned against Maxwell. Still want to marry into this crazy family? He kissed her. More than ever. No more lies, no more secrets. We'll build something new. Speaking of building, Rose smiled mysteriously. There's something I haven't told you about your father's old engine designs, but that story would have to wait, because right now they had a wedding to plan, and this time nothing would stop them from getting their happy ending. The garden of the Richardson estate bloomed with white roses, not for show this time, but for love. Rose stood in front of the mirror, her mother adjusting Catherine's restored veil. Something old, something new, her mother said softly, touching the veil and then the locket containing baby Robert's picture. Something borrowed, something blue. Rose touched her father's blue handkerchief, tucked into her bouquet, and the pearl bracelet Dr. Preston had lent her, a gift from his own wife. 6 months had passed since Beatrice's fall, 6 months of healing, rebuilding, and truth-telling. The papers called it the Richardson Redemption, how a cleaning lady's courage had exposed decades of lies and brought justice to 2 families. Vanessa was serving time, along with her network of conspirators. Dr. Preston, after testifying against them all, had been named head of a new medical ethics board, and baby Robert was thriving, already showing his grandfather's curious mind and his grandmother's gentle smile. It's time, Rose's mother said. The garden was filled with an unlikely mix. Richardson board members in expensive suits sitting next to Rose's old co-workers from the clinic, her mother's church friends chatting with Manhattan socialites, a true blending of worlds. Dr. Preston stood at the altar beside Maxwell, who bounced baby Robert gently in his arms. The 6-month-old wore a tiny tuxedo and his father's grin. But before Rose could take her first step down the aisle, a murmur went through the crowd. A side door to the garden had opened. Maxwell's father's old butler emerged, looking uncertain. Miss Williams, there's someone. They say they knew your father. Rose turned and the world seemed to stop. A woman stood in the doorway, older, grayer, but unmistakable from the photos Rose had grown up seeing. Catherine, she whispered. Maxwell's mother took a shaky step forward. I'm so sorry. When I learned what Beatrice had planned, I had to disappear to protect everyone, but I've been watching, waiting, hoping. Rose didn't hesitate. She ran to the woman and hugged her tight. You're just in time to meet your grandson. Maxwell, tears streaming down his face, carried Robert to his mother. 3 generations of healing, wrapped in one embrace. The papers, Catherine said when she could speak again. Robert's engine designs, I kept copies all these years, hidden, protected. They're yours now, both of yours, to use the way he would have wanted. Rose smiled through her tears. Actually, we're already working on that. She nodded to the back of the garden, where a sleek prototype car sat gleaming in the sun. The first Richardson Williams hybrid engine, green energy, affordable for everyone, just like Dad dreamed. Together, Maxwell added, taking Rose's hand, the way it always should have been. The ceremony that followed wasn't just a wedding, it was a healing, a fresh start. It had a bridge between worlds that should never have been separated. Dr. Preston gave a speech about mistakes and redemption. Rose's mother sang her husband's favorite hymn, and Catherine held her grandson, whispering promises of a better future. Later, at the reception, Rose found Maxwell standing by his father's old office. "Having second thoughts," she teased. "About you?" "Never." He pulled her close. "Just thinking about legacy. Real legacy. Not the kind my father worried about. The kind your father and my mother tried to build, and now we'll build it together." Rose touched her stomach with a secret smile. "All of us?" Maxwell's eyes widened. "Are you—" "Dr. Preston confirmed it yesterday, twins." Maxwell laughed out loud. "Robert's going to have his hands full as a big brother. Good thing he has so many people to help him." Rose looked out at their gathered family, blood and chosen, old and new. So many people who know what really matters. As they danced, under the stars, baby Robert safe in his grandmother's arms, Rose thought about circles closing and new ones beginning, about a cleaning lady and a businessman, about true love and second chances, about mistakes that turned into miracles. "Happy?" Maxwell asked softly. Rose kissed him. "More than happy. Ready. For what? For everything. For our next chapter. For making the Richardson-Williams name stand for something good," she smiled. "For living happily ever after." And they did. Because sometimes the greatest love stories don't end with the wedding. Sometimes they're just beginning. Sometimes the biggest miracles come from the smallest mistakes. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to fight for the truth, if you're strong enough to choose love over fear, if you're willing to believe in second chances, sometimes fairy tales do come true. Even in Manhattan. Even for a cleaning lady and a billionaire. Even for a family built on science's mistake and strengthened by love's truth. Baby Robert cooed in his grandmother's arms, reaching for the stars above the garden. Stars that seemed to shine a little brighter now, as if two souls, a brave mechanic and a Richardson who chose love over money, were watching their dreams finally come true. Break to